Barbie Joe Biden's ticket to another 4 years in office? Analysts over at MSNBC discussed the 2024 race this weekend and had the following take.
This is Iowa. It's all the same except for gender. Everything else is the same on ideology, on college education. We are seeing more men identify as Republicans and more women not.
Well, that's something that the Republican Party needs to deal with, because there are a lot of women in this country.
And we just had the summer of Barbie and Taylor Swift tour. I mean, women are having a moment in this country where they have an economic impact. They are having a voice, and they're going to want to go to the polls and reflect that.
Right, that's why I thought Nikki Haley did a good job in presenting that face.
She potentially has room to grow if she can somehow get women to show up.
So there's a lot of, everybody's afraid of going after Trump, right? But if you look at primary polling, Trump's around 52%. Half of the party isn't aboard. Now, if there's 10 people splitting the rest of the vote, that's a problem. But if you can consolidate.
Now, the Biden campaign aides reportedly are not happy with California Governor Gavin Newsom. Biden loyalists consider Newsom's potential debate with Ron DeSantis to be a nuisance. An outside advisor to Vice President Kamala Harris reportedly commented on Newsom's possible debate move, saying, quote, "It's disrespectful. Joe Biden is running with Kamala Harris. That's the Democratic ticket."
Speaking of Vice President Harris, she spoke with Reverend Al Sharpton on MSNBC this weekend. Let's check in.
I think so much about, I talk about, we talk about the arc. I think about it as also like a relay race, and those who carried the baton and were measured by what they did when they had it, and then they passed it to us.
Yeah. Well,
and the point will be, what do we do while we're carrying the baton?
Before we pass
it. Understanding that the race will never be over. But the question is, what do you do in the time when you're carrying the baton?
That's exactly right.
Most races end. But Nikki Haley again took to Twitter to remind her followers of Joe Biden's, quote, decline, continuing a vote for Joe Biden is a vote for President Kamala Harris. So how dare Gavin Newsom, try to worm his way into political discord, national prominence when it's the summer of Taylor Swift and Barbie? How dare he?
Okay, so for one, I do think that there is a lot to be gained by capitalizing on what appeals to women, but I don't think it's because Nikki Haley is a woman. It's because that most people in the country, have a view on abortion that's far to the left of what the Republican Party is backing right now, including some hardliners who would advocate for a 6-week abortion ban, which almost nobody likes. So Nikki Haley making her pitch during the debate as to how she would thread that needle, basically saying that even if you want something harsher, it's not going to happen in Congress. We might as well stop talking about it. And also, let's pass legislation on the things that we all agree on. And her characterization, late in life abortion is a thing that we could legislate around, I think is a smart move. But any candidate could pick up that baton and run with it, as Kamala Harris says, to use her metaphor, regardless of their own gender.
I could feel conservatives responding to you, so to give voice to what they would say is, but also the Democratic Party or most Democratic national officials have embraced an abortion policy that is much more progressive than most of the country as well. I don't know if any Democrats trying to do a federal "you must abort your baby at 9 months" policy. There should be no limits whatsoever right until birth on abortion.
No, it's not. That's absolutely not. There's, of course, limits. Of course there's limits. Viability has been largely adopted across the country. Moreover, to the extent that some people say that you can't have bans on end-of-term abortions, it's because of things like when the baby is gonna die anyway, right? And you don't want to have to put the mother through the trauma of birth. Health risk is the mother. Those kind of exceptions have to be built in, unless you just want both the mother and baby to die at the end of the process.
Most people, including most Republicans, support that.
But that's the thing. The broad public agreement about how obviously you have to have emergency options in those kind of very niche situations that are tragic for the families involved is being characterized as Republicans as, we want to late term abortions. And they put these pictures out of people having DNCs, these, I understand, kind of horrific seeming operations where you do have to chop up a baby in the body to get it out of the mother. But those aren't done for for fun. Sorry, those aren't done just for people to get their jollies. It's medically indicated procedures to save the life of the mother.
Right.
And so weaponizing those kind of horrific moments that are so traumatizing for families to argue for things like a 6-week abortion ban or to pretend there's more polarization in this country than there really is around this issue is kind of dark. And Nikki Haley, for what it's worth, is, I think, she was able to present the issues. I don't agree with her substantively, but she was able to present a middle ground that sounds so much more reasonable than a lot of these men in the Republican Party who have been chest beating about 6-week abortion bans and the like, to the detriment of their party's successes.
Mike Pence is a social conservative. I don't know that most of the candidates out there think there should be a national federal abortion policy. Chris Christie said he didn't think that.
Yeah, most
I don't know that Ron
don't.
DeSantis thinks that. I don't know. They think that different states are going to that this is a genuine issue of substantive disagreement in the country, and different states have a different political valence, or
you're right. Most
right or left are going to make different.
Don't believe that.
Even have a different what is the week cutoff.
But when you have
we'll
Lindsey
eventually arrive
Graham,
at something.
when you have leaders, when you have senior members of the Republican Party advocating for it, and when you have a Republican Party that always said, "Hey, we're going to turn these issues to the states. Don't worry about it. You'll be able to make your own decisions."
Yeah.
Now it's turned to the states, and you had half that stage at the GOP debate saying this is a moral issue. We can't actually leave it to the states.
I remember
we
Mike Pence saying that.
Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy also doubled down on that, I believe. I don't
recall what he said.
And I want to say that Ron
Doug
DeSantis
Burgum pulled out his
well.
pocket constitution and said this constitution does not allow the federal government to decide a national abortion policy.
Burgum and Haley were the only ones who really seemed to firmly say that we need to let the states do what they're going to do. But there was, I think that the concern is, I saw a really good tweet about this over the weekend. The concern is that at this point, no one trusts what the Republicans are going to say on this issue because they already are perceived to have lied and are going farther. Some members of the party are articulating a desire to go farther than they ever said they would go. And so at this point, even if a Republican, even if the whole field actually responded to that question by clearly saying we've achieved what we wanted to achieve at the Supreme Court level and now it's for the states to decide, a lot of Americans aren't going to believe them. And as you're seeing these state efforts across the country to strip away abortion rights on a state basis, that's part of why you're seeing Republican voters turn out to knock those efforts down in places like Kansas and Ohio, states that are not blue bastions because they care about this issue so much.
Although, again, Georgia had an abortion measure as well. Then Brian Kemp suffered no blowback for it. So it's, it's a little bit more, I think it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah, I also think that 14 weeks in 6 weeks, or the prospect of 6 weeks, also makes a big difference for people.
Yeah, absolutely. 14 weeks, again, I say this all the time, is in keeping with France and the UK and other European countries.
Well, this is why we get into the issue of how far are they actually willing to go, and that people don't trust. People don't trust the Republican Party anymore, and that's on the Republican Party. The last point that came up in that clip that we didn't respond to, Kamala Harris was talking about the civil rights anniversary today. It seems that actually I didn't find to be incoherent or cringy.
I mean, it was just a weird.
I think it's fine. Her pacing and tone is a little funny and easy to make fun of.
Don't call it a race if it never a race specifically.
It's a metaphor.
Well, it's a bad metaphor. I mean,
okay. I don't think it's a crime to have a bad metaphor. I think the worst crime is the Democratic Party's insistence that there not be an actual debate or an actual primary. I love the idea. I have no fondness for Gavin Newsom from a policy perspective, but I love the idea that someone who has as much kind of credibility as a mainstream Democrat might be able to expose the undemocratic nature of how the Democratic Party is running this election season.
Sure, a coronation for Joe Biden, and then next maybe a coronation for Kamala Harris in 4 years. Who knows? That seems like I expect that could be the way that some people in the party try to make it go. Obviously, Gavin Newsom will speak up more loudly when and if Joe Biden is out of the way.
What do you make of Nikki Haley's approach there at the end to try to frame a vote for Joe Biden as a vote for Kamala Harris? Is that an effective scare tactic for folks who might otherwise not come out to vote against Kamala Harris?
Maybe. I mean, it's getting at the underlying fact that, while we beat up on Biden a lot, you don't care for his policies from the left. I don't care for his policies from the right or from an individualist perspective. He is, I think, still much more popular than Kamala Harris. who nobody likes. So maybe she can.
But enough to motivate people to turn out of their houses.
I mean,
and vote?
who is the vice presidential candidate doesn't really matter for the standpoint of the election. It matters to like pundits and like, oh, that was a great pick because they bring the regional balance or the gender balance or the something balance, but it never really matters very much.
Yeah, I think it's a little silly. She got a lot of flack from people who were accusing her of being racist for making that argument. That was anti-black
I
to
think
kind of
she was just saying
front
Kamala Harris is not good, and,
yeah, I think
that Kamala Harris will certainly be emboldened by another Biden term and will be a very formidable Democratic Party establishment candidate in 2028 because of that. I think
it's a bridge too far to accuse her of racism for that, but I do think that it's silly and kind of beyond the point. She got a spike because she was talking about real issues that people cared about. I don't think that people are thinking about Kamala Harris enough as a threat or as anything other than kind of a punchline to a joke to try to leverage her into any political gains.
Joe Biden is going to pass the baton to her in the never-ending relay race of life that just goes on and on, as races do. More Rising right after this.